All right. Welcome back, everyone, for my first podcast episode of the Modern Masculine Podcast. Here with me today is one of my best friends. He's like a brother to me, Mr. Matt Kopec.
Appreciate the introduction, brother. Glad to be on here. I know it's your first episode, and whether you end up doing this as just a hobby or, as a way to, as a mode to facilitate any business endeavors you have in the future, man. It's an honor to be on here and an honor to be your friend,
Thanks, man. I appreciate those kind
of
words.
course.
And yeah, I suppose a little introduction. I kind of want to give our audience a backstory into, kind of how we met and how our relationship has um, really grown over the years. So I guess just, if you can just take us back, it doesn't have to be a lot or it can be, as long as you want. But I guess just kind of where did things really start? I guess for us, and why we're on this call today.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to the very first time that we actually like kind of connected. I had seen your face, several times prior to that, given that you were someone that was joining a fraternity that I had been part of for a couple of years at that time. Um, I remember we kind of like just smoked after a party one day and we just really connected. Granted, we didn't really see each other talk too much after that, but there was a connection there. And then I remember the next year I was the house manager for your classes, stay in the fraternity house. And you didn't necessarily do the typical things that everyone else was doing in the fraternity. It's kind of interesting how fraternities are supposed to be the opportunity for you to kind of cultivate your manhood with other people, similar interests and whatnot as yourself. And basically, about 2 weeks in, you kind of just went on your own path from what, the traditional way was in the fraternity. And a lot of fraternities where it's parties and trying to figure out how to get with girls and trying to look cool in comparison to others and kind of playing those social schemas and stuff. And I remember Noah was meditating in the sub basement while we were having parties in the actual basement, and it was just like such a peculiarity that like no one like even understood at all. And I too kind of felt that way as well, but it was interesting because then you really didn't show up to chapter at all. You really didn't do any fraternity events. You end up leaving the fraternity house halfway through the year during winter break. And I remember you had came up to my room around the time that you were like kind of turning in your key and such. And then you're just like, let's definitely stay in touch. And I remember we kind of worked out a couple times that year, but nonetheless, we didn't really see each other too often. I went to the new house that you had moved into, which was kind of like a community house where you rented out like a room. And you basically, from there, were kind of transitioning away from leaving college to kind of pursuing your own route. And you didn't even quite know what that was anymore, but you had been really in tune with your spirituality and wanting to just create something on your own regard and your own path. And I admired that a lot, even though if you really didn't necessarily have the complete direction in terms of what you wanted to do yet, you were really devote in what you were trying to do. Perhaps you did know deep down at that time, but it was a very interesting thing because I remember you had these meditating devices where like it would create different sounds and you would meditate to those, and you just had different types of like life hacks and biohacks and whatnot
Yep.
that like I try to pull little bits and pieces from that. And flash forward to the next school year, it was like kind of the COVID year where they're just like locking down everything and there wasn't really too much going on in the city, or if there was, it was kind of very much mitigated. um I remember I went to your place and we basically, connected from jump. I mean, I showed you some Jack Harlow music. You're like, damn, what the hell is this? But kind of from there, we ended up doing this one really massive spiritual trip about 2, 3 weeks into that school year. Um, I had done it in the past, but it was kind of like in like a party sense setting, and it had been years for me. And nonetheless, like we really connected as brothers and really set an intention to like really work on ourselves and move forward, in what ways we can possible. So, I mean, I was not particularly in good shape. You had started your fitness journey for about a year at that point. When you moved into the frat house, you were very just skin and bones for the most part, and I was kind of skinny fat. And we worked out like pretty much no other D1 athlete was really working out like in general. Like we were doing 4x10s of deadlifts, bench, hang cleans, squats, and we're doing after that like a 3x5 circuit where we're doing all these different kettlebell and like burpees and planks and all that. And we basically got to like less than 5% body fat, extremely strong, extremely toned. And around the same time that you had launched a business with a good friend of yours, Lance Shuttler, and
Of
you
ours, of
invited me.
ours,
What's up?
of ours, both of our friend.
Indeed, indeed, my man. And I'm glad that you introduced me to him and your guys' company as it went on. And one of the first trips that we did together, like literal trips in
Hmm.
the material form, was we went to Florida on a business trip to meet some influencers that were promoting your guys' products. And that was such an eye-opening experience. We met some people that just talked from a different level of consciousness. They had their life very well together, but they had this knowledge and wisdom that was beyond anything that you're kind of introduced in a normal setting at all. And it was a very eye-opening experience for both of us as just young kids. It really just it was a motivating thing because I feel like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And that trip was really transcendent in that. Um, from there, I would go on to graduate later that spring. Your business would continue to gather momentum. The summertime would come, and essentially you would move over to Austin because you guys had enough money and capital to basically move wherever you wanted to. Lance had moved to Florida shortly after you had moved to Austin, and he had invited me to come along with him to kind of be a personal assistant slash like business analyst of sort for his other business and Ascent as well. And from there, like I kind of watched the development of yourself from afar, as well as my own development that was going on in Delray Beach. And it was such an interesting time in life because I feel like, in a way, it was we were introduced to such a broader world when we didn't know so much and we were so young. And it was such an interesting experience because you got to go into the realm of the unknown to transform in a way that you maybe we weren't ready for yet, but in a way that we were ready for in our own way. I feel like everything divinely happens at the right time for it to happen. Um, so it was funny. I would work with Lance and Delray Beach, and it's so hard to even explain what Lance is like or how the business operated because it really was just like ridiculous. It truly was. I would go over to his casita on like this ocean front in Delray Beach, which is one of like the most nice exotic places you could really be in America,
Yeah,
honestly. And
really.
it was such an interesting way we would start the morning. We would walk on the beach and then we'd go inside. We'd like sniff essential oils. We would get a couple of business things done, send some emails and stuff, talk about some creative ideas. He had usually some meetings with some people throughout the day.
Yep,
Yeah, like a small, tight knit group of people that we worked with. And it was such like an interesting dynamic between all of us and such. And you and Lance were kind of learning your own ways of becoming leaders and organizations and such. And it was such a really amazing experience. And nonetheless, there was love between all of us. We all brought our own different type of alchemy, and I feel like we were all living from our spirit. And that was such a beautiful time of life.
absolutely.
Then Noah would go on to sell Ascent, his part of Ascent, later in the year in 2021. About like half a year. It's the both of our journeys in Austin and Delray, respectively. And kind of from there, I left Delray because I was basically kind of just involved in it as Noah's friend, but ultimately I was Lance's friend as well. But I also felt like in a way, it's kind of interesting because I feel like in a way we were our own kind of warriors in life where we just know when we served our purpose and we just know when to leave because of that. Like no one told us to
Mm,
leave or anything at that point. It was just how we kind of moved, you know what I mean? Um, so I left Del Rey and I was gonna go straight to Chicago and kind of just start the normal life where you start applying for jobs and fix your resume up and stuff. But I stopped in Austin to visit Noah and I stayed there for a week. It was such an eye-opening experience. We microdosed just about every day that week, and it felt like it was about a year because we had like a year's worth of experiences and growth spiritually during that time. It was such an awesome time too because I feel like we had both like fully lived into our potential at that point and like completely like felt like exactly how we should be like if we lived through it. And you know, it's a part of life that most people don't necessarily reach fully. And they know people know deep down they've reached their potential or not in that regard. And at that time in life, I'm like, wow, I really feel like I'm living to my full potential right now. And I feel like that's why when that week felt so special in a way, because it was a celebration of what we had accomplished over the past year.
and
Just
now just to double down on that. So when did that feeling come for you?
hmm. It's so interesting. I look at that one picture that was one of my profile pictures on Facebook where I'm on a paddleboard and the skyline of Austin's in the background. And there was a couple pictures that we just randomly took while we were out there, but like there's like that one in particular because I had like a slight smirk on my face and I was kind of looking the camera directly in the eye, but it was also kind of like an impromptu picture. Like I forget the
Mhm.
word for it. Like it wasn't actually like a planned picture. I just
Was it
looked at
candid?
you, yeah, candid, and I could just see who I truly was in that picture. I'm like, that's exactly who I am. Like
Mm.
I just the facial expression and everything. And like that was a beautiful moment in that. And I was probably one of my peak fitness levels that I had ever been. I was tan. It was just a really great time. Um, and you know, we had an excellent week. We met some really amazing people. We went on that awesome birthday dinner for a good friend of ours. I would go back to Chicago for like 3 weeks. And I was just like, no, what? I need to get back to Austin. I don't really have too much money in my pocket right now, but I'm just going to go out there and try to make this work. Um, so I got offered a room in a community house in Austin at the beginning of 2022. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And
right.
just for the listeners, so he took a week-long trip to come visit me, and then he returned back home to Illinois, where he's from, and then I'll let you pick it back up, brother.
Yeah. So basically, I had about $2,000 to my name after I put down the money necessary to like get the room and whatnot. And I was like, you know, this would be about enough money for me to last a month out here. Maybe I could pay rent again for next month potentially.
Yep.
Um, so like I would wake up every day, cold shower, meditate. I would go to this hill where that overlooked the skyline of Austin, and I would do this breathing exercise where like I spread my arms out like I was like Jesus or whatnot,
Yeah.
and basically just try to like bring in as much energy as I possibly could while I was like breathing in and out really hard, overlooking the skyline of Austin. Just like, what can this city bring for me? Like, what can I do and manifest in this city?
Mhm.
Um, one of the first jobs I took was at like this bike shop, and I knew nothing about bikes. Never was a handyman type person. I mean, I graduated with a finance and business analytics degree, so I mean, I've done, you know, things that like coding, calculus, things like that. But working at a bike shop was such a is a blessing in a way because I'm learning all these handyman things. It's a different way of using your brain. You learn to appreciate the blue collar, you know, positions in the world and things like that. And it was such a good stepping stool to for me to get into Austin. And while I was working that job, I signed a lease. I started filling in my apartment. I got a job as an analyst, which was kind of in line with what I, you know, was traditionally going to do after college. You know, I was working this desk job that ultimately was like killing my spirit though, because I would have about 2 to 3 hours worth of work a day. And I had to be there the whole 8 hours and act busy the whole time. I had a very
Mm.
micromanaging boss. And when I was quite frank with her, like, you know, I'm finishing my work, like, I'm very much on time with everything. Is there anything that you'd like me to do? Because I'm really not doing anything right now. And
Mhm.
basically, the consensus, without really saying it, was like, "Shut up, dude! Like you're sitting here for 8 hours and you're looking busy. Keep on like clicking cells on this
Mm.
Excel sheet, basically."
Mhm.
And I just like I remember after I'd done that for about a couple months, we had done like it was kind of like a mushroom trip of sorts. I don't know how much we did. It was a microdose nonetheless. And it was around the same time that you were trying to get the modern masculine up and running. And you felt some financial pressure at the time because you were living in this really expensive condo and, downtown Austin. And
Oh,
I feel like it was around the time where like you were starting to kind of realize like money might become an issue, or like I'm about to launch this business. I don't know if it's gonna help make do for me to live this life that I'm living right now. And essentially how Noah was living at that time was in pure ecstasy. Like he was living this like really awesome Zooker at the Park condominium. You step outside with the paddleboard and you're on the Barton Creek, which was just like a flow of vibes, so many interesting people and beautiful people and just people from all over and guru type people for real. They're awesome to engage with, and we would just kind of go right out on the Barton Creek about every day and just catch a vibe out there and maybe bring a joint out there and maybe play frisbee at the park afterwards. It was just like literally the most perfect lifestyle you could think of.
right.
And so around that time, I remember we went on like a walk and we reached this one place along the Barn Creek Trail, and it was this like death pool. It was like this pool of like mud and had
Yeah.
like snakes going through it and all these flies, and it was like starting to drain out.
Sorry to interrupt you for one
Yeah,
second, just for the listener. So at this point, we were under the influence of a very minuscule dose of psilocybin mushrooms. So yeah, so this was a very profound, I don't know, how would you call it? Like a checkpoint almost on our journey.
yeah, it was a liminal moment. I call it something
Boom.
like that because I think we were starting to realized that like there was going to be a massive shift
Yep.
coming soon, and like it was going to happen, and we didn't necessarily know
Yeah.
what was on the other side of it. But
Right.
it's
Because we were
interesting
kind of
because
like in the middle. We were in like the eye of the storm. At this
yeah,
point,
it was truly the eye of the storm. And I remember I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna quit my job the next day because like I hate living this way, and I'm gonna
mhm,
try to figure something else out. And at the same time, I mean, you were going through a relationship that was on its brink as well.
mhm.
And um,
Absolutely, man. I mean, it was just
yeah,
incredible,
I
what I
think
put up with for so long.
it's interesting too because now I think of why this is such a liminal moment, and I like how you call it the eye of the storm too, because I feel like this is when it started flipping from us going to order into chaos.
Right.
It's exactly when that moment had happened, um,
Mm,
and
beautifully said, brother.
yeah, and kind of from there I would quit this job. I remember right after I quit it, we went to Dallas to go see a Mike concert, and I got to
Yep.
see an
Mike
old buddy.
Stud for any
Yeah,
listeners out there.
yeah. And it was such a great trip because like I feel like that's like kind of like when we committed to like chaos or a new chapter. We had been in
Yeah.
Austin basically in the same square mile, a couple miles for about 6 months, and for you almost a year plus. And it was so interesting because I saw an old friend, and it was great because it was one of the first times I had seen an old friend since I went on this journey, from Iowa to
Mhm,
Delray to Austin. And like I
mhm,
felt like, wow, like I've actually truly developed in a very interesting way. Like I feel like I've had like a spiritual awakening, a spiritual love. I've been so vulnerable with the world, and like it's allowed me to like grow in a new way. And like I feel like if you look at pictures from right before we went on the journey to like toward the end of the journey, the way that we transform, not just necessarily like just because of the exercising, but just from the experiences that we had within to what we looked like on the outside, we truly transformed in a lot of different ways. And it was pretty awesome. If you look back at pictures when we went to Florida for the first time and we were with Lance and Jay and Monica, like outside of that Ruth Chris and
mhm.
Naples. Um, we look like
Legendary.
children. We look like children in that picture. And then by the end of it, we look like we had fucking been through everything. You know what I mean?
True
And
warriors, like you said.
yeah, and it was so special because like we kind of committed just like, life is life. We're going with the flow of it, and
Right.
like it might lead to chaos, but like ultimately we're gonna try to like keep our head on straight. And we came back after an excellent concert, and I remember you had met this guru guy on the bridge near
Mm,
your place by Barn Creek, and he invited you to do like this writing excursion exercise where
yep.
he would basically take you out somewhere and then have different prompts for you to write on or meditate on.
Yep.
And you told me about this one day. I'm like, wow, this sounds awesome. I've been wanting to get into writing. I'd like to come along. And, I was offered the opportunity to. And I remember we went deep into like a jungle-ish area of the Barn Creek Trail. And the first exercise that he had us do was write a love letter to nature. And we both kind of took it in different ways. Um, you had a really pure sense to it where it was like, had to really truly do with like nature and whatnot. And mine was kind of more or less like the human nature of things. And it was kind of an interesting juxtaposition. But he also noticed too that we were in going through like a lot of like pain um, at the time as well. And I think he was under the impression that like we were kind of still like in the hot shot position and whatnot, and
Yep.
recognized that we were like kind of leading into our demise at that point. I remember, there was a point where you broke down crying during that.
Yep.
Um, we would meet him again because this would be like a four-part like exercise excursion thing. So we'd meet him week by week for about a month. Second one was write a love letter to your mother. That was such an interesting one because there was also such an interesting juxtaposition between the two of us in that one as well. It's interesting because I feel like in a lot of ways, like, I mean, it's interesting because you were from Iowa, I was from like an urban area, Chicago, and like we had things that were similar but opposite. And like in a way, it's kind of like in a yin and yang sense. And I feel like these exercises helped us kind of see that a little bit.
Hmm.
The next one was write a love letter to someone that you hate. Um, I wrote it to myself, and you wrote it to like a stepfather that had done you
Mm,
wrong in the past.
hmm.
Um,
Mm,
and then the last one was write a love letter to yourself. And we did that one on the rock at Zilker at the park, like overlooking the skyline.
of
And
course.
that was such a beautiful one because you were about to move out of Austin like a week or so after that.
Yep.
And it was an interesting point in time too because I had just gotten a job and I was going to be able to stay in Austin, indefinitely at that point. And you were on your way out. You basically had went from having so much money to about none, and you're going to go live with your girlfriend who you kind of were starting to get into a little bit of a toxic situation with. She was this
Kinda.
yeah, very toxic.
Yeah.
She was like a 42-year-old woman, and
Yep.
it was interesting because like I don't think she fully knew your situation either. But nonetheless, you guys moved to California around that time.
Yep.
So it was when you were about to go to California, and I was about to stay in Austin,
Yep.
and it was such a interesting point in time because I think he knew at that point too, like what was going on in both of our lives and how we were essentially both broke at that moment. And he didn't ask for anything when he left. He just like, I'm leaving you two here, and he left. And this guy is like a very, after you just do some research on him, he's like an acclaimed writer. He's written a lot of very well-known articles, or what he calls love letters.
Yep.
Um, and that's essentially the type of things that he had us doing week by week. Um,
Not to
so
mention, just a very prolific thinker, just very deep,
yeah,
deeply tied to spirit. Very connected with his soul, and just was able to beautifully craft. Really, just by kind of taking our looking at our behavior and looking at us for who we really are, and from there, like really like pulling out the best and the worst parts of us, of
Indeed.
ourselves.
Yeah, it was a very
On a whim
powerful.
too, completely, not scripted. I think we should shout him out, Brian Rashid Global on Instagram. If you guys want to, really take your intuitive abilities, like really tap into your full capacity, he is the guy. So
Yeah,
I want to give him a shout out there.
and the way
I
he
hope he
lived his
listens to
life
this.
was so beautiful, where he's moving to all these different cities and then just kind of meeting people that he, feels like some kind of connection or spiritual
Yep.
energy from, and
Right.
then like doing these deep dive activities with them to help facilitate their lives.
Exactly.
He's really helping facilitate the dream of the planet by doing
Mhm.
that, and he probably doesn't get recognized enough for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a really
There's a lot of
special
talks in like spiritual
thing.
communities about like light workers. And he is truly one of those people that I look at as like really like an example of what life can be like when you truly just, go with the flow and like almost like cut out all of whatever else the world is saying and just focus on your one mission, your one goal. Because I mean, if you look at his life and what he's been able to do with these love letters, I mean, it's truly remarkable and it's just so inspiring. And so, yeah, I can't, I could, dude, I can't say enough good about Brian Rashid. And so, thank you very much.
Indeed, indeed. So it'd be interesting because we would go off on our own paths for that summer.
Yep.
And it came a point where you had been hopping around the country, where you were in California with your girlfriend at the time, and then you met someone and you were living in New Jersey. And then I remember you calling me from there. It was an interesting point because we were both like kind of still going down that chaotic path, but we had such a spiritual love that like we just kept on going. Like we really like should have hit rock bottom already, felt like, but we just
Mhm.
kept on fucking pushing, man.
Oh yeah.
And I offered for you to come move in with me in Austin. I was in a pretty shitty situation at the time where I was working a sales job that was definitely not the right thing for me to be doing. It was so interesting because I had started microdosing shrooms quite early into the experience because I have a lot of social anxiety. I've always been a little bit more on the introverted side of things, and I need to be more extroverted.
Mhm.
And I was abusing the shrooms past what their use was. It was so interesting because I kind of was stepping into something I wasn't quite ready for in terms of after doing the shrooms, I was building really deep connections with everyone, and like it was kind of like an ego thing where like I'm getting affirmed from people and I'm not getting affirmed from people. Nonetheless, you had moved into my place, and I was basically paycheck for paycheck working this job. You don't get paid too much in insurance sales when you start off, and I remember it kind of came to a point where like it was so interesting because we had been living in luxury so much in the past year, and then at this point, there's more cockroaches in my studio apartment than we had dollars. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
There
literally.
truly was that moment in time, and it was interesting because like I wanted to do anything I possibly could to help us out, but like in a way, I just knew we just were going down this wrong path. It was
Yeah.
tough because you didn't have a car, and like we lived basically like out in like the forest, and like the
Right.
next business was like 3 miles away, and you know what I mean. Like it was very hard for you to like get yourself acclimated to like where I was living and stuff, and we were both going through so much grief at the time as well. Um, I remember it was so interesting because at the same time I was reading the book Wild at Heart, and
Mm.
it's like you really want to be able to forget the three elements of what an adventure is in it, but one of them was like you want to be able to like sweep up a beauty in your adventure. And I felt, in a very chaotic moment, and I was basically trying to rush a relationship that probably was not ever meant to be, or I wasn't ready for. And it was kind of like a last limb because I knew I was burning out. The drugs had been burning me out. The stress was burning me out. A job that I wasn't ready for was burning me out. While I was stepping into in this job with the influence I was gaining, I wasn't ready for. And I basically, in a way, kind of self-sabotaged myself. And it kind of came to a point where like I'm like, I'm probably gonna be getting fired here soon. And there was a moment where we went to this overlook in Austin on 360 highway, overlooking the skyline through like these like massive houses. And it just started pouring on us like crazy. And we were in pure joy because like joy in a way, and what I realized now from this trip is just like knowing deep down that you're going to be okay no matter what, and just loving the life's journey along the way. And that's how I felt in that moment. So I'm like, we honestly have hit our demise. It's storming like a motherfucker on us, and unless we were in like the most pure joy that we had ever felt in our whole entire life, and I remember it was so interesting too because like some other car was stuck on the overlook too. You couldn't leave the area because it was just pouring so much. And we hopped in the back of his car. He had all these flashing lights, and like he was like this guru type himself. And basically at that point, we were telling him our story, and he kind of helped narrate or help us through, the type of pain that we had been going through at that time, and just basically shed light on the friendship that we had created, that like we were still trying to push through and live this journey to completion. And I feel like it's beautiful because a journey could end when you really do have that growth. And I feel like we had that growth, and that's why it was such a pure amazing moment in time. And about a week later I would get, the HR situation would go on. And at that time, right when I got cut, we would go off to Enchanted Rock, about 2 hours west of Austin, and we knew it was the end of the road at that point. You had already gotten tickets for to move back to Iowa, and I would, end up leaving my apartment shortly after. But we did this activity where we like wrote on a piece of paper. What exactly did we write? What was the prompt?
I'm glad you brought this up. Yeah, so the thing that we wrote, it was write down your biggest regrets.
Hmm.
I believe it was just that one prompt, right?
Yeah, it was like that. And
Yeah,
I think I really didn't write down much. I was like, I really don't regret too much
right.
because um, I felt like I had the growth that I needed and the experiences I needed.
Hmm.
And what I didn't realize yet, I knew I would be able to digest through personal development and learning in the months to come. And it's been a tough 8, 9 months since then,
Yep.
but I wouldn't have had it any other way. I feel like I'm doing a good job at learning my lessons, and just evolving into a new person, a new chapter, and shedding the ego that I had been developing. And
Hmm.
we're so much more than our ego. And I'm realizing that, and it's helping me push to a new level of consciousness. And it's so interesting because I feel like we grew so much on this journey in our spiritual development. And on that journey too, we had materialistic success and then materialistic fall as
Hmm.
well. And in a way, like a lot of that was also parallel to the egos that we had developed and lost as well. And kind of one of the main parts of dealing with the grief since is I had to really let go of what had happened. And I feel like, I mean, I cried like I never had cried before a couple weeks ago. And it
Hmm.
was so relieving because I feel like when you're living so much out of spiritual love and the love of life in that way, you have so much passion for it and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, like when you realize there's like an ego death going on, you need to let go of something that meant so much to you, it could really hurt you a lot unless you truly cry it out. And
Hmm.
I like yelped from my soul. It was like such a deep cry and like such a powerful cry. I feel like it ultimately kind of helped me get to the acceptance, after all of the bargaining and depression and anger I may have felt over this past year since I came back. And now it's just time for a new journey and a new mission. And I feel like a lot of times something that happens to you, um, whether it be traumatic or negative or neither of those, would just really be impactful in your life. Um, it it can open your eyes to maybe show you a new path, and that's ultimately how you have to see failures. It's an opportunity to repivot and take lessons and see something in a new light. And I feel like we both recognize the way that we want to live our lives going forward, the gifts that we have, the things that we want to give to others. We recognize our why, and we realize too that it's and one of the things that I wrote down that I wanted to emphasize about manhood and what I've learned from you as well is kind of this one statement is, I will never artificially attempt to correct some supposed imbalance in my soul just to align with society.
Mm.
Um, Actually, that maybe doesn't align so much with what we've been talking about per se, but I feel deep down
Maybe
on
it'll
my side,
resonate
I
for
don't want
someone.
people to tell me who I am or what whatnot. But ultimately, if I'm living from my spirit and I'm trying to do the best good that I possibly can, like I'm gonna find my way in whatever way that looks like. And it might not have as much sprinkles as it had in the past when we were kind of living in luxurious situations,
Mhm.
but ultimately I can still find joy and happiness and passion in life no matter what. And I feel like if you kind of have that deep down within you, you don't need the fame or the wealth or the influence per se,
No,
but you have yourself. You know what I mean? And I feel like
right.
that's what matters, and that's like where your depth as a man could really come from.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And you just so well, beautifully summed all of everything that we've been talking about up. I think that's really probably the best place to leave it. Um, so, yeah, I just want to thank you again, Matt, for coming on and sharing with my audience our beautiful life's journey. It's going to be fun having you back on and expounding upon some of the rabbit holes that we've gotten into today. So,
Yeah, absolutely, my man. Thank you for having me on here, and it was really therapeutic and really lovely to be able to share all those things and do along with you because it's a nice way to recollect that moment.
likewise, brother. All right. Much love. Thanks for everyone who's listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye.
All right, much love, Noah. Peace.
Bye.